desperate to fill the gaps in his experience. A clueless teacher takes a risky step with his student's sister. But the fallout is more than he ever bargained for. When Mr. Teacher gets his first job at a middle school in the city, he comes to know that students do not have any knowledge about the human reproduction system. He decides to teach them himself, which angers a local church leader. The movie starts with a sad man working on a Bubby's bagel shop one evening. He sees a couple kissing near the counter. The boyfriend asks to use the bathroom, but Mr. Teacher says no because he thinks they'll use it for something inappropriate. The boyfriend then offers to buy all the bagels if they can use the bathroom, but Mr. Teacher still says no. Things get tense when the woman recognizes him as her old teacher who used to teach geometry. Her boyfriend gets mad and calls Mr. Teacher a loser. Our teacher explains he works for extra money. But the boyfriend grabs bagels from the counter and throws them at Mr. Teacher. Teacher was annoyed by all this. He left the bagel shop. When Mr. Teacher gets home, he finds his roommate, JT, with his new girlfriend, Ally, in his bed. Frustrated, Mr. Teacher tells JT he hasn't even used his bed for that yet. JT apologizes and introduces Ally, but Mr. Teacher still feels annoyed. Meanwhile, JT told him he had a mail for him, but that's in the bathroom. Isn't that weird? Later, Mr. Teacher reads the mail, but it was another rejection letter from a job he wanted. JT tells him not to give up and says he deserves to be a teacher. Feeling determined, Mr. Teacher goes to Mr. Washout's office the next day and demands a chance. Impressed by his courage, Mr. Washout checks his resume and gives him a job at the middle school. When Mr. Teacher gets back to the apartment, he finds JT and Ally about to engage in quirky lovemaking right in the living room. He interrupts to share his good news, explaining it's an after-school study program. However, since commuting might be an issue, he thinks it's time to move closer to the school. Although his roommates feel sad about seeing him less often, he jokes that it's probably for the best. At least he won't walk in on their antics anymore. Soon, Mr. Teacher meets his new landlady, Sydney, who invites him to her bar downstairs later to meet the other neighbors. That evening, he visits the bar and compliments the great music. He casually mentions he played the oboe in his high school jazz band. Sydney laughs, teasing that the oboe isn't exactly an instrument that attracts women. On his first day at the new job, the enthusiastic teacher introduces himself to the students as their after-school activities coordinator. But to his surprise, the kids don't seem excited. They explain that this isn't a fun club, it's detention. Then, Leon volunteers to freestyle rap using Mr. Teacher's name. However, the rap turns dirty, making the other kids burst into laughter. Suddenly, Shelley returns from the bathroom crying and says she's dying from cancer. Confused, Mr. Teacher asks what's wrong, and she reveals she's bleeding from her private area. Realizing it's her first period, he rushes to grab feminine products from the teacher's lounge. Shelley, unsure how to use them, says her dad is at work and she doesn't have a mom. Mr. Teacher calls Ally, a nurse, to help her. After school, Mr. Teacher spots Tito, waiting for a ride. Moments later, Tito's beautiful adult sister, Pilar, arrives and introduces herself, leaving the teacher struck. Just then, her boyfriend Hector drives up to pick them up. That evening at the bar, Mr. Teacher tells his friends how little his students know about their bodies. Later that evening, Ally suggests that Mr. Teacher can still teach the kids about the reproductive system, even if he's interrogated. JT defends him, insisting that Mr. Teacher does have experience, but jokes that it's been a while since he's been with a woman. JT even encourages him to get out there and casually date before committing to anyone he likes. The next day, Mr. Teacher decides it's time to educate his students about the reproductive system, so they don't grow up confused or misinformed. But trouble arises when Leon keeps interrupting the lesson with inappropriate jokes. Frustrated, Mr. Teacher tells Leon to go to the principal's office. Leon panics, pleading with him not to send him there because his father will punish him harshly. Still, Mr. Teacher stands firm. Later, in the bathroom, Mr. Teacher overhears Reverend Hamilton scolding Leon and forcing him to wash his mouth with soap. Concerned, he steps in to explain that his after-school program is meant to teach kids about the changes they experience during puberty. But Reverend Hamilton pushes back, insisting these talks should happen at home, not with a teacher he doesn't know or trust. That night, Mr. Teacher goes on a blind date with Trish at Sydney's bar. Sydney spies on their awkward small talk, clearly got entertained. Things escalate when Trish, after a few too many drinks, takes him to the storage room to make out. Suddenly, she bursts into tears, confessing that men only date her because of her reputation for being easy. Mr. Teacher consoles her, reassuring her that she's a good person and suggesting they don't have to rush into anything physical. Unfortunately, Trish misinterprets his kindness and assumes he's not attracted to her, because he seems interested in men instead. After his date leaves, Mr. Teacher heads back to the bar, where Sydney greets him with a knowing look. She tells him she could tell from the moment Trish walked in that he wasn't interested. Mr. Teacher admits that he didn't like Trish much, but felt he had to lower his standards because it had been a while since he'd been with anyone. Sydney disagrees and reminds him that not getting any doesn't make him less of a man. She also advises him to get over being broke and single, encouraging him to focus on what matters. The next day, Mr. Teacher gives his students a lesson on the risks of unprotected intimacy. He explains the many diseases that can be transmitted and says the only guaranteed way to stay safe is to abstain. However, for those who choose to engage, he emphasizes the importance of using protection. Since the students don't seem to take his advice seriously, he shows them a slideshow of graphic images of these diseases. The lesson ends with him demonstrating how to properly use male prophylactics, leaving the class both shocked and informed. After school, Tito approaches Mr. Teacher for advice, confiding that he wants to be intimate with his girlfriend, Margarita. Mr. Teacher tells him not to rush into anything and warns against trying to mimic what he sees online. Moments later, Pilar arrives to pick up Tito and shares that her brother considers Mr. Teacher his favorite teacher. She then invites him to dinner at their house, saying their mother would like to meet him. That evening, Mr. Teacher meets Lupe, Tito, and Pilar's mother, who welcomes him warmly and asks for help preparing dinner. As they work together, Hector arrives, and Pilar introduces him to Mr. Teacher. While setting the table, Pilar casually mentions that she works as a DJ and invites Mr. Teacher to one of her shows if he's free. The evening feels warm and lively, leaving Mr. Teacher with a new sense of connection. When Pilar heads to the kitchen, Hector appears and casually offers Mr. Teacher a drink. As they drink, Hector remarks how strange it is for a teacher to attend dinner at a student's house, subtly hinting that he knows Mr. Teacher is attracted to Pilar. Feeling uneasy and having had several drinks by this point, Mr. Teacher excuses himself to the bathroom, splashing water on his face to stabilize. During dinner, Hector notices Mr. Teacher's contorted face and dares him to eat a fisheye. Trying to fit in, Mr. Teacher eats it but instantly regrets it when he throws up on Lupe. Embarrassed, he ran from the house and heads straight to Sydney's bar. Sydney, ever the voice of reason, reassures him that everyone has embarrassing moments and encourages him not to let one bad night keep him from pursuing the woman he's interested in. The next day, Mr. Teacher asks JT and Ally to help teach his students how to communicate respectfully with the opposite gender. The female students, thrilled by JT's presence, urge the charming ex-roommate to flex his muscles and show off his abs. Eventually, the class settles down, and the students sit across from JT and Ally to ask questions about real-life scenarios they might face. After the session, JT and Ally admit they're shocked at how little the students know about their bodies and gender dynamics. Later, while Mr. Teacher and Tito are outside the school, Pilar arrives and reveals she and Hector are taking a break because he was too possessive. Taking advantage, Mr. Teacher invites her to the bar on Thursday night to watch an Afro-Cuban jazz band. To his delight, she accepts. The following day, Mr. Teacher is called to Mr. Washout's office, where he learns Reverend Hamilton has filed a complaint about his class. Mr. Teacher explains that he's only teaching general adolescent health, but Mr. Washout warns him that the district doesn't allow such topics, especially since the Reverend specifically campaigned against it. Mr. Teacher tells Mr. Washout his students need this class because many are already trying things out. Mr. Washout tells him to talk to Reverend Hamilton himself. In class the next day, Mr. Teacher sees more students than usual. They say they heard about his special class and came to join. But when Mr. Teacher says there's no lesson today, the new students leave. After class, Mr. Teacher talks to Tito in the hall, asking if it's okay to date his sister. Tito says yes. After work, Mr. Teacher meets Reverend Hamilton. The Reverend says schools shouldn't teach about human reproduction system because if they don't connect it to God, teens will think it's just normal body stuff and do it too much. Mr. Teacher asks him to come watch a class to see how they teach with respect. The Reverend agrees. Mr. Teacher then goes to his old home and tells JT he has a date with Pilar. In the bedroom, JT says Mr. Teacher should stop being so slow with dating and act bold as he is a grown-up man. He gives Mr. Teacher some pills he got from Canada that he says will help him during love performance. In the next class, Reverend Hamilton sits in the back, watching Mr. Teacher answer student questions. But when the questions become less about science and more about private things, the Reverend leaves angry. He tells Mr. Teacher he's just making the students think bad thoughts and will stop the class. After class, Tito asks Mr. Teacher for protection, saying his girlfriend wants to be intimate with him. Mr. Teacher says no because Tito is too young for something that could change his life. But Tito says he'll do it anyway, with or without protection. On his date, Mr. Teacher tells Pilar he gave Tito protection. Pilar gets angry, saying Mr. Teacher should have told her so she could stop her brother. And he is alone at home as her mother is away tonight. They both rush to the house and find Tito kissing her girlfriend. As Margarita sits on the couch, Pilar scolds her and Tito, telling the girl and Mr. Teacher to leave so she can talk to her brother. When Mr. Teacher insists on staying, Pilar furiously blames him for everything, saying it's his fault for giving Tito a protection and teaching him how to use it. Feeling defeated, Mr. Teacher heads to his car, but Hector confronts him outside, furious about his relationship with Pilar. The encounter quickly escalates, and Hector beats him up. Bruised and humiliated, Mr. Teacher later picks up a woman, believing she's interested in him. He takes the pill JT gave him, pretending it's for a headache. Before he can put the bottle away, the woman takes one herself. Moments later, Mr. Teacher notices something unusual, a male organ protruding from beneath her dress, revealing she isn't a woman. Before he can process the situation, the police arrive and arrest them both for an illegal transaction. When he finally returns to his apartment, Mr. Teacher confesses to JT that he's never actually been with a woman. JT admits he always knew, saying no one ever believed his made-up stories. JT reassures him that it's nothing to stress about. It'll happen when the time is right. The next day, Mr. Washout meets Mr. Teacher in the classroom and announces that the after-school program is canceled, implying that Mr. Teacher has been fired. Days later, he's back at his old job at the bagel shop, where Sydney stops by to check on him. Mr. Teacher recounts the chaotic events that led him back to square one, mourning that if he had just been with a woman once, he'd have the confidence he needed. Sydney dismisses this excuse, telling him to stop blaming his lack of experience and instead focus on becoming the man he wants to be. Determined to make reparation, Mr. Teacher later apologizes to Pilar, explaining that he was only trying to do the right thing. He confesses his feelings for her and decides to show it with a grand gesture. He assembles his oboe and plays her a song, despite his lack of skill. Pilar appreciates the effort, and as they stroll through the city later, they share a kiss by the river. That night, Pilar invites him to her favorite club. At the door, she greets the bouncer, Bobby, but the bouncer blocks Mr. Teacher from entering. Pilar assures him she'll just say hi to her friends inside, and then they can leave together. But as she disappears, Bobby tells Mr. Teacher to go home, implying Pilar isn't coming back out and is way out of his league. As Mr. Teacher waits outside the club, Hector suddenly appears, furious that he's seeing Pilar again. Their argument quickly escalates into a fight, drawing the attention of the police, who arrest them both for causing a public disturbance. Later, while nursing his bruised ego at the bar, Mr. Teacher has a realization. He needs to get his job back. Determined, he decides to confront Reverend Hamilton the next day. The following morning, Mr. Teacher rallies his students and crashes the Reverend's support group meeting. There, he openly admits to the crowd that he's never been intimate with anyone and sometimes doubts if he's qualified to teach the class. However, he passionately defends his work, arguing that if the students don't learn this in school, they'll pick up harmful misinformation from friends or the internet. One by one, the students speak up to support him. They share how the lessons have made them more informed and careful. Leon adds that there are some things he just can't discuss with his father. Moved by their words, Reverend Hamilton finally agrees to let the class continue. Afterward, one of the support group attendees approaches Mr. Teacher to praise his courage, only to shock him by flashing her chest and offering her number. That evening, Pilar visits Mr. Teacher's apartment to congratulate him on getting his job back. She teasingly mentions that Tito told her he confessed to being inexperienced. Pilar kisses him and begins undressing, but Mr. Teacher suggests they celebrate with his friends at the bar instead. She surprises him by saying she wants to be his first partner. However, Mr. Teacher politely declines, explaining that he doesn't want his first time to be just for the sake of doing it. Annoyed, Pilar suggests they go to the club instead, but Mr. Teacher reminds her of the last time she left him waiting outside. Pilar promises this time will be different, claiming she's only trying to make him cooler. Realizing they might not be as compatible as he thought, Mr. Teacher admits he's okay with staying true to himself. Pilar mocks him, saying he might stay chaste forever, but he calmly counters that he's fine with that. At the bar, Mr. Teacher shares his frustration about still being inexperienced, but Sydney reassures him. She tells him that being a man isn't about physical milestones. It's about taking control of your life, and he's finally done that. 1 year later, Mr. Teacher has one of the most popular classes in school, earning the respect of all his students. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a like to support the channel. See you in the next video.